Welcome to Let Go, Let EFT, where we are learning and leaning in with you, with your hosts Michelle Puster and Dr. Laura Spiller. EFT is a beautiful model helping people connect with themselves and the people that matter the most, developed by Dr. Sue Johnson. Hello, Dr. Spiller. How are you?
Hi, Michelle.
So today we're going to be talking about one of our favorite topics, getting caught in the content. And it's something I think we often talk about from the very first externship. It seems to be a pretty big topic in EFT. So what comes to mind for you when you think of getting caught in the content?
Well, I was thinking that we focus on it a lot because if we don't, we can really get caught up in this flood of information. And I don't know about you, but when the information is kind of coming at me in this flood, I can really start to feel confused and lost. And I sometimes start to think, I've got to figure this out. I've got to organize it. And that puts me into my mind and sort of out of my heart. It makes it really hard to attune with them when we're trying to figure out how this information fits together. And we can lose our focus, right? We lose our focus on their dance with each other.
Yes, and it seems like couples often come in wanting to talk about the content, right? Like wanting to talk about the disagreement about the kids or about the chores or about money or about fill in the blank. And they want to talk about the details of that. And so it can be very, it can pull us in, right? And we might want to know more about the content. And we might want to stay there. You know, part of us wants to stay there. And like you said, sometimes if we're just in the content, it does feel very disconnected from the emotions in the room. We might be missing a lot of emotional handles. Mm-hmm. We might be missing how they're feeling inside when they're talking about this content. We might be disconnected from, like you said, how we're feeling when we're talking about the content. So, noticing it, how it can kind of take us away from being in that emotional embodied place that we want to be, and that we want to try to bring our clients into with us, hopefully. Mm-hmm. So I guess thinking about where we might get stuck and where as therapists, it's hard to manage the content, where it's hard to, like the self of the therapist piece.
Yeah, I think, sometimes when we're taught this, it's not about the content, it's about the process. We err on the other side of trying to, to ignore or to exclude the content. And the struggle is finding the balance between using the content, but not getting caught up or lost in the content. And I think that's the balance, thinking about how you can use it.
I'm so glad you said that, because when I first heard don't get caught in the content, I can be very like black and white. Okay, and no content's bad, only emotions. And really that's a detriment too. That doesn't work. And I've often, or at least there's a few times that I can remember feeling burned by that, where maybe the content, explained an injury, an attachment injury, or maybe they just needed to use the content in order to talk about it. So I've heard you say using the content as a container. And I love that idea, is that the balance is using the content as a container. We don't have to ignore it. In some cases, you definitely can't. The affairs comes to mind. The clients would be there would be a huge disconnect if we tried to ignore the content. And at the same time, yes, finding this balance of taking this sometimes flood of information and using it as a container, but using it to still focus in on what's happening inside and going into the emotional handles and going to what's happening in the body. So what might this look like if we try to make it practical for people listening?
Yeah. I want to give credit. I think the content as container comes from Ryan Rana and James Hawkins, or it might be Catherine Ream. She's talked a lot about content, the use of content too. So, but all those brilliant people that we learn from. But similarly, when we think about, my sense of a takeaway is that the content is the cycle or a block. So that approaching it kind of with the CPR, the catch the block, the give it permission, validate it, and then return to kind of where you want to be working. And that's a success and vulnerability, or a Ryan Rana, George Fowler, James Hawkins kind of concept. But the idea is, you feel it. We feel it. We feel it when we get away from that kind of heart channel. So noticing when you're getting that kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm just lost in all these words. I'm not feeling my people here. I'm not feeling them, my folks. That give yourself permission to interrupt and to name it. Hey, feels like we're really talking about a lot of facts and problem solving, and I'm having a hard time really connecting with your hearts as we talk about this. And that makes sense. This is a really big problem. I know you guys have been stuck here for a long time. It feels like analyzing this and figuring out what the problem is and how to fix it is the right, will get you someplace better. But can we slow down here, and you can help me understand what's happening in your hearts as we talk about this?
Right. Yeah, I think this interrupting, giving ourselves permission to interrupt is so helpful, because it's rude, right? Like in general, if we're having a conversation with someone, it's rude to interrupt. And so sometimes even as therapists, it can feel very rude, and also maybe a bit confrontational. It can feel like not good. However, people sometimes will even say like, oh, thank you, because they recognize they'll just go off and off and off. They'll just sort of spin out, and they don't feel tethered or grounded. They're not feeling like we necessarily know what's going on with them. And so sometimes I'll even let people know ahead of time. I do often interrupt. Is that okay with you if I interrupt and just try to check in and see if I'm following you and see if I'm on the right path, and letting them know ahead of time. Or if I haven't done that, and it's sort of like someone who does use a lot of words to explain how they're feeling, I'll ask, I interrupted you a lot today. How was that for you? Was that okay? So I might ask permission. I might say this happened, because I'm also, I do care about the alliance and how that's impacting them and our relationship. And like you said, if my intention to interrupt is like, you're walking along this path, or maybe you just started running and I can't catch up. I don't really know what's happening with you. I don't know why this story is important to you. I'm not really meeting you where you're at or serving you. So
behind, I love that image of them starting to run down this road and we're going,
Right. So if they feel our intention isn't dismissive, like, oh, here they go again, just, be quiet already, get back on my track. If they feel that our intention is, wow, this is so important to you. I hear passion. I hear intensity coming up as you talk about this, and you're wanting to tell me a lot about, let me just slow you down and see if I'm getting why this piece that you're talking about is so important to you. Can you help me? Or we might say, what's happening inside as you talk about this? I just noticed this intensity as you're talking about this. So some way of, I hear that this is important. I hear something's happening here. Help me get closer to it. Help me get closer to you and what's happening, so that then they are not feeling that rude, kind of, far from dismissive. The fears that we might have, right? It's very much like, let me check in, let me attune with you.
Yes. I love how you're really naming that it's hard to interrupt. It's a struggle for us to interrupt. And one of those reasons is that sense of, that we're kind of not honoring them and what's happening with them. And so one way that we can interrupt is really explicitly sharing the fact that we get how important this is. Well, I'm also thinking a second reason that we don't interrupt, at least for me, and I'm going to confess here, that when there's a lot of content, sometimes, I mean, I get confused. And maybe it's because I come from being a cognitive behavioral therapist, and there's this part of me that when there's a bunch of content, goes right up into problem solving too. And so I start to feel like I don't know what to do with all of this information. And it used to make it hard for me to interrupt because it's like, I don't have it figured out. So I don't know what to give them here. And it's been so helpful for me to now use that feeling as a cue that this is their cycle coming up. And it's, this is all that problem solving analysis content that they think is going to help them, but is really taking away from the tools that we know.
Yes. And I heard from some, like you said, some excellent trainer who I'm not sure exactly who said it first, but they probably more than one has said it, which is go back to the most poignant thing that you heard. So like, I like the intervention that you just said, which was, hold on here, let me catch up what's happening, and using that our body as a tool that like I'm feeling lost or frustrated. And also being able, we might just say that and name it, or we might be able to say, the last poignant thing I heard was you said you felt completely lost. And then, they went off to tell this long story about whatever it was. And can I just go back when you said you felt completely lost? So something that stood out to us, something that was poignant, that can be sort of a marker that we can go back to, that was an emotional handle that can help us sort of like go back to that channel of the heart, of the body, what's happening inside.
Yes. I think these are great takeaways, Michelle, right? I mean, what you're saying there is it's okay to interrupt. It's okay to trust your instinct of feeling like we're not getting to, this is feeling important on one hand, but like not where we need to be on the other hand. Letting yourself interrupt and doing so with a lot of validation. Get how important this is. I can really feel the intensity about this. I know this really matters to you. I appreciate you helping me to try to understand it. Some sort of, if you're going to interrupt, follow it up with some kind of validation. And then bring it back to something that feels like it's more in the right channel. The most poignant thing you heard, or even, and if you, sometimes I can't remember what that is because I've kind of gotten all confused. It's just a general question, help me understand kind of what's happening in your heart as you talk about this. What do you say to yourself about your relationship in this story?
That's a good one. I like that one.
Some kind of question to get you back in the attachment emotion channel.
Yes. So I guess for closing here, one of the things that I used to do, and actually I might do it again because those cues are helpful. We might write on the top of our clipboard, it's okay to interrupt, or trust your body, right? If we're feeling lost and frustrated or whatever, like that's a good time to step in. You might write down one of these phrases that you liked that you could use in those moments. So that's what I used to do, was borrow other people's words when I hadn't found my own words yet. And I still do that. If there's something new that I haven't quite found my own language for, is borrow our language that we borrowed, right? Because it just helps us in those moments when inevitably we all experience this.
Yeah. Forgive me for interrupting, but I don't want to get lost. This sounds so important. Help me understand what's happening for you on the inside. If you can write those 4 sentences, I mean, you can absolutely make them your own. You can say there's many, many right ways, but if you want just a little handhold, tool to help prompt you with some lines, absolutely.
Maybe we'll invite you guys to put in the comments below, what is a phrase that you use to interrupt or that you've heard that you're going to try? And you can share with us what yours is so we can all benefit and see a list of options that we can use in these moments.
Sounds great. I can't wait to read all your beautiful ideas of bringing people back to their hearts.
Well, thank you, Dr. Spiller.
Thanks, Michelle. Look forward to talking next time.
Bye-bye.